Today on Locked On Canadiens, which free agents would we not touch with a 10-foot pole?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1109 of Locked On Canadiens. And we want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day every day. As you know, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. My name is Laura Sab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm not joined as always by my wonderful co-host Scott Matla. Scott has lost power due to the remnants of Hurricane Beryl sweeping through where he is, and then tomorrow they'll be sweeping through where I am, so he'll probably be doing the show solo. And on that note, tomorrow's show is a mailbag episode, so please get your mailbag questions in. We do have a couple left over from last week, but you can email them to us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com, or you can leave them in the YouTube comments, or you can tweet or DM them on Twitter. Our Twitter account is LO_Canadiens. Also, many of you have sent them to me on Instagram. You can do that as well. But either way, you could tweet them to me individually at the Active Stick. But either way, get your mailbag questions in. So on today's episode, I wanted to look ahead a little bit. I wanted to look ahead to what the Canadiens will look like this time next year, and what free agents, if any, the Montreal Canadiens could or should be targeting. This is, again, it's a speculative exercise, but I just really want to take a look at what the Habs will look like and what their expectations should be next year. So I'm going to start by saying, we know that the Canadiens are not done with their rebuild yet. We are hoping that they're able to challenge for a wild card, because that shows progress. Yes, I know that means no man's land most of the time. It means not a high draft pick and not a playoff appearance. But we want them to shoot for the moon either way, because they've got a lot of young players. And as the year wears off, as the year goes on, some of the veteran players will come off the cap. Like either Kent Hughes will find trades for them or other things, and more young players will make this team, and we'll have to start really playing as if they're already in contention, right? Like that's what you want. You want them to develop. So we've established that what our hopes as fans are, they challenge for a wild card. And again, if the season is lost in October, yes, maybe we hope for something that happened this year, which is they got lucky and they got the 5th overall pick again. But the way that Kent Hughes and the scouting staff, et cetera, approached the last 2 drafts, it seemed like this was the last year they kind of intended on purposely having a top 10 pick in the draft. So what happens next year? A lot of players will come off the cap, and I got to tell you, Cap Friendly has been offline for half a day, and it's already ruined my entire life. Like, I am having so much trouble just talking about hockey without Cap Friendly, and I'm so excited to see what sites will emerge as contenders for the replacement. I know Puckpedias have been working really hard. I know there's a couple of new and emerging sites. So for those of you who are huge hockey nerds like myself and Scott, tell us what you're using in the interim. Tell us what's been impressing you, and tell us that over the course of the year. We're not shy to use good resources to discuss this kind of thing. But let's go back to the topic at hand. So where do we think the Canadiens will be next year? Like, I expect them to finish just outside of a wild card spot. So they will still be outside looking in. But I personally feel that it will be a less, like, the feeling that we'll get at the end of the season, and most importantly, the feeling that the Habs and the staff will get at the end of next season, is that they're a couple pieces away from making the playoffs. Making the playoffs should not be the end goal, right? We had many years of mediocrity based on the philosophy that, quote unquote, if you make the playoffs, anything can happen. We were witnesses to anything happening, but the Canadiens still didn't get a Stanley Cup. As you know, we're always talking about, or this front office is always talking about being a perennial contender. They're willing to wait a little bit longer in the hopes of longer term success. So at that point, what the Canadiens should be looking to add is either a game breaker or some veteran presence, but that still has the ability to play and contribute in a strong way. Are we expecting Ivan Demidov to make the team next year? That's the hope, right? His contract in the KHL/MHL runs out at the end of next year. Also, just not to go off on a tangent, but a lot of you have been asking again about when he could come and whether the Canadiens can buy out. They can't legally buy out a contract from another league. That's an agreement. That's something that it does not allow. It's not allowed, right? But what they can do is negotiate with the player's current team and league to bring the player over to North America. And they could potentially have considerations for them in that situation. I don't know if a bonus is legal or not, because there's a little bit of iffiness. Like some people have been reporting, yes, it is, some people haven't. But you cannot buy him out. You can come to an agreement with his team and his league to bring him over. So in all likelihood, Demidov is going to play another year in the MHL, or hopefully they'll let him play in the KHL next year. That's the likelihood. So he's not going to be here until next offseason, right? That's one. Two, we do expect that the defense will be a little bit more solidified, i.e., we'll know which of, let's say, Lane Hudson, Logan Mailloux, those players will have made the NHL. And right, David Reinbacher, how could I forget? Will have made the NHL by the end of next year. We'll figure out like which one of those is going to get traded for something, which one of those is going to make the NHL. Those three I'm expecting to be on the blue line, right? But like David Savard will be coming off the books. We don't know with Mike Matheson. There seems to be general consensus here that he's going to get traded. I've not heard anything from a media source that is plugged in that that's going to happen. It just seems to be like fans wanting that to happen, which it could, right? There could be a market for him. There could be a buyer for him, but I think they're going to keep him around for a little while. They like him a lot, and he does contribute. This is the best year he's had in his career on the Montreal Canadiens, right? You can't just throw that away. So let's say worthy assets come in for Mike Matheson. He'll be off the books. So like in my mind, that defense, the future of the defense will be solidified. They might not be at the level we want them to be at, or at the level we expect them to be at. How could I forget Barron and Xhekaj? You know, obviously they're going to get their deals, and we're going to figure out where they fall. Are they going to stick around? Not, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like they don't have that surefire number one defenseman that is like one of the best in the league, right? Like a perennial Norris Trophy contender, right? They don't have that. That is a need that they have. Like, we don't know if it's in the system, but the projections don't say that about any of these people, right? For all of Lane Hudson's creativity and genius, he's not projected to necessarily be that guy, right? There are still flaws to his game, etc. For all of Caden Gooley's ability to step up and jump in on the transition play, etc., I don't know if he's the cornerstone, right? Like, so we do still need to figure that out. The Canadiens do still need that. They need to figure that part out. And it's not the end of the world if they don't have one, if they have a solid D. But all of this to say, like, where I think they're going to end up is the biggest needs that they're going to have are in terms of free agents to sign, is who they'd want to be bringing in is probably a forward. Like, that's where I'm kind of expecting them. So like what we'll know is, one, Demidov, he's probably going to be playing in the NHL the following year. We'll know a lot more about this defense and the logjam, et cetera, who's going to be playing where. We will know specifically who's coming off the books, whether it's in terms of buyout or people that they can trade or intentions they can have. You know, like there's a lot of players on this roster that if there's a deal to be had, you know, Kent Hughes is going to make that deal as soon as possible. Anybody comes knocking on Josh Anderson, he's going to say yes. Anybody comes knocking on Christian Dvorak, he's going to say yes. Anybody comes knocking on Brendan Gallagher, that's a little bit tougher. But there's a lot of veteran presence on this team that isn't necessarily required going forward. Like, and I'm saying this to be nice. So I think the biggest need that they're going to have in terms of UFA is a forward. So in our next segment, what I'd like to do is take a quick look at what is available on that front. I'll look at the goalies and defense too, just to kind of see if there's anything interesting out there. And again, this is just speculative, like, not pipe dream, et cetera, et cetera. So in our next segment, I'd like to take a quick look at that. And that's coming up in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. But first, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, so in our previous segment, we kind of talked about what we expected, where the Canadiens expected to land next year, and what glaring need that they would have for FA. Again, I don't want, this is in addition to, right? It's not just Demidov makes the team and then Kirby Dach stays healthy, et cetera, et cetera. This is in addition to. There could be a lot of value to be had in players the Habs already have in their pipeline. We don't know what's going to happen with the Owen Becks, the Sean Farrells, et cetera, et cetera. Joshua Roy, we're expecting to be on the team. Raphael Harvey-Pinard, what happens to him, all of that kind of stuff. So we're not 100% sure. But for me, what's, I think, the most intriguing option? So I want to talk real quick about some of the big names that are going to be available. Currently, as we're speaking on Wednesday evening, Sidney Crosby is technically going to be available, but let's be honest. Sidney Crosby is very close to an extension. I believe I heard somewhere in the realm of 3 years at $10 million with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He doesn't seem to be interested in going anywhere else. And as fun as it would have been to have him in Montreal, he's off the board. We know that he's off the board, right? There's a very minuscule chance that the talks that are apparently very close to being finalized do not result in a 3-year contract that will take him likely to his retirement. And Kyle Dubas has expressed that he wants Sidney Crosby to retire as a Penguin. Sid kind of said the same thing in a lot of words. So everybody who thought, okay, that might be an option for my team, our balloons or bubbles have been burst, whatever. Kyle Dubas. Oh, real quick, I completely forgot to remind everybody that tomorrow is our mailbag episode. Our email address is lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. On Twitter, we're at LO_Canadiens, and you can also use the YouTube comments. Just put mailbag question or MBQ, just so that we know that you want us to talk about this in the mailbag. And we really, really appreciate it because it is off season. It is time to have some fun. We do have some draft analysis coming up of the past draft coming up soon. We also have some content from Hattie and Sebastian that we're really excited to share with you. And as you know, they are fantastic. They're great at analyzing prospects, and they have a show called Locked On NHL Prospects. So once you're done with us, obviously make that your second listen of the day. And I do believe they will be talking about the Montreal Canadiens at some point this week. So check that out. At the same time, getting back to what we were talking about, Sidney Crosby's off the board, right? And then there are some people where it's there's no way their team is going to let them go, like Mikko Rantanen, right? He always comes up in these lists, and it's the Avalanche are not going to let him go, and he's not stupid, right? Something has to go dramatically wrong this year. But another person like that we think is like that, or that we think there's no way their team would let them go, is Leon Draisaitl. Now, it seems like a no-brainer that he's going to re-sign in Edmonton, but if you look at their cap situation and the fact that Connor McDavid is also coming up on renewal, I think it could be tough for them to pay him what he wants and what he deserves. And I think, if the Edmonton Oilers had not made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Final Game 7, And if, let's say, they had lost in the first or second round again this season, I would have said it would have been a lot easier to target somebody like Leon Draisaitl. But to me, he's not a pipe dream like the other two. He's not and I think that there's like, if there's even a tiny bit of a possibility, it'll cost the Canadiens a lot. But if the Oilers allow it to get to a point where he can talk to other teams, like, I think that he would be not just the one that makes the most sense for the Canadiens to call and inquire after, but it would, like, I feel like they would not be doing their jobs if they didn't call and see what it would take, right? And again, like, if you're the Oilers, you definitely want to keep those two together. But if you have trouble with your cap, managing your cap, even with the increase, it's going to be the Canadiens' opportunity, right? Like, and there are some other teams that could be a bit more attractive to him, but he's still young enough, and the Canadiens have been doing exciting enough things where they could be a place that you would want to play. But I like, again, I have a hard time seeing it, but this is not a no way. This is not a extremely out of the question kind of situation. It's just unlikely. Then there's a couple of players where, to me, it's like, do not want. And it's a little bit, to me, it's like, it's a little bit, it depends on context, right? For example, John Tavares is a do not want. Not because of like, oh, he's a Leaf, oh, he's expensive, oh, he's got whatever injury problems, etc. He's on the wrong side of his prime, right? He's fully in decline, and he's clearly fully in decline. Not that he would entertain being a Montreal Canadien. He's clearly like a Toronto, like, bleeds blue, whatever. But he's somebody where it's like, he's one of the first do not wants. As much as, I enjoyed Tavares's time, let's say, more with the Islanders. And to a certain extent, it was fun watching all of the Leafs for obvious reasons. Like, I think he's a do not want. So, somebody else who's technically available, will never happen, and also do not want, is Brad Marchand. And this is going to be controversial. If he was younger, I would absolutely want him. He's essentially, like, people always describe Brendan Gallagher as Brad Marchand without the baggage, right? He's essentially that. But again, it's an age thing. He would never sign here. He's the Bruins captain. He will probably take whatever offer they give him, or, like, I don't know if he'll give them a Patrice Bergeron special or whatever, but it's just like, he's meant to be a Boston Bruin. But again, if he was younger, he would not be on my do not want list at all. Claude Giroux is a player that I was obsessed with. I was obsessed with the Montreal Canadiens getting Claude Giroux. And I think part of this was because there was so much made of the fact that the Montreal Canadiens passed on him. So did the Flyers once. The Flyers picked him with their second pick in that draft. And it talks that, like, we talk about, like, who didn't pan out for the Montreal Canadiens, blah, 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 blah. Nobody knew that Claude Giroux was going to turn into what he was. But he's also, like, getting close to 40. And he now has what I call Sens germs. Like, he's tainted with that failure. So no. And then my favorite do not want, because I feel like he's a prime candidate for an I can fix him GM or an I can fix him coach, is Mitch Marner. Because Mitch Marner is undoubtedly extremely talented, still young, still in his prime, extremely, extremely. But he seems to lack the killer instinct. Like, people think that, oh, he has loser mentality, et cetera, he's a choker. The Toronto Maple Leafs fans are merciless about him. They are ready to run him out of town, et cetera, et cetera. I think that there are a lot of factors that go into that. We know a lot about, the kind of hockey dad he has and the pressure that he has, and how Mike Babcock, the nice way to put it is, bullied him a little bit when he first came to Toronto. It's like, he's been in an unfortunate situation, and I don't necessarily think that he completely lacks mental fortitude. I think that it's kind of a catch-22 where he will need to leave Toronto to regain it, but he would not want to leave Toronto. So he's stuck in a situation that is not optimal for his success. And the longer he stays there, the worse his chances at success are. I feel like with the right management, getting away from where he is, getting away from not just that fandom, but maybe putting a little distance between himself and the pressures, might result in him being able to be successful on a different team. But I feel like that's not that, like, he's just always going to be stuck there and not realize that that's the problem, right? And again, he's a phenomenal talent. Like, if he didn't have those, if he didn't have that, I would say, baggage attached to him, I would say like he should be like the prime free agent that everybody should be targeting, and he should not even re-sign with his own team. He should sit there and wait for the blank checks, like, sorry, for the pitches, right? Like, every team should be pitching for him, but unfortunately he's tainted with that. He's going to be stuck there. Like, it's very unlikely that you see Marner leave Toronto, and therefore it's going to be unlikely for him to achieve that success that he wants to. And all of this to say is that we still have a couple of people to discuss, and that's happening in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. What is Gametime? Well, let me tell you, it is here to take all of the stress out of buying tickets. Gametime is an app, and honestly, like, let's say right now it's the summer, right? Lots of Major League Baseball games going on in so many cities, but then you've also got concerts, you've got comedy shows, you've got all kinds of really, like, big events coming to all of your cities, and summer is a prime time for that. I just think of all the stadium concerts that happen, right? And Gametime is the way that you're going to get your tickets, because they have last minute deals, and you can save up to 60% off of buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, anything. They have flash deals, they have zone deals, and for me, the biggest thing is they have all-in pricing. All-in pricing means that you don't see hidden fees. What they tell you you're going to pay is what you get. They also have seat previews, so you can see where you're, like, what the view looks like from the tickets that you are buying. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets or any tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. So we talked a little bit about free agents the Canadiens maybe might want to look at, but might be a pipe dream. We talked about do not wants and do not touch with a 10-foot pole. There's one that I think will be off the board by then, and we've brought this up. So I'm sorry that Scott is not here, because I was going to get into a whole other coveting Nikolai Ehlers segment, but he's more likely to be traded this season, I believe. He's going to get traded to a team that's going to be able to extend him. And I just don't know if the Montreal Canadiens are that team. And so to me, like, when I say, like, you know, somebody to target, I mean realistic, but also still good, right? Like, there's plenty of people that are going to be available next year, but these guys that I named, like, I've named like the top of the what's available, and I've talked about how, you know, most of them are not realistic, but I think Nikolai, he's still young. He's not even 29 yet. He's somebody that Scott and I have constantly talked about as someone that we want. And that's something where if I'm Kent Hughes, I'm calling about a trade. I'm not waiting for him to become a free agent. I'm calling it's a sign and trade or a trade and sign, whatever happens. So that to me is like, let's say the free agent the Habs should target. And then there's a couple of names that I wanted to bring up in terms of defensemen. Now, we talked a little bit about how, you know, we'll see a little bit more. There's only really two names that really stand out to me. And then one is Jacob Chikrin, who was in Ottawa, so he was tainted with that Ottawa loserdom, but also had a lot of issues, right? Like with injuries, et cetera, et cetera. So let's say he can stay healthy. I think, to me, he's still quite young. I believe, I don't even think he's 27 yet. Let me just look this up real quick. Oh, yeah, He's not even 27 yet. He's somebody that the Canadiens should be grabbing. And then this one's also like, it's a name that doesn't really come up, but when I was looking at who would be available, and I have to be honest with you, I haven't really followed Vegas in depth all that much this season. I don't know what it was. Like maybe it was just an overdose of Vegas from last year. But I think Shea Theodore is somebody, like I think in their playoff series against the Montreal Canadiens, he's somebody that was always catching my eye. He's somebody I was always coveting. He seems to be maybe one of the longest tenured people on the Vegas Golden Knights. So I think, in terms of defensemen, he's an interesting name. He's a little bit older. I believe he's 30 or close to 30. And like the only reason this could be a realistic possibility is because Vegas has no loyalty to any of its players. And as soon as they get like even a little bit close to getting a cap crunch, they do some sort of magic where people are always mad about this. They're exploiting a system for a reason. And you know what? Get a GM or a capologist that's smart enough to exploit the system too, instead of getting mad. If you can't beat him, join him. So I think the only way he would become available, because he's kind of like a franchise cornerstone at this point, as much as you can call anything a franchise cornerstone for a team that's only existed for a handful of years. So he, to me, is like another intriguing name. And then in terms of goalies, I think what the Canadiens really need to do is not look at free agents. What they need to do is they need to figure out what's going on with all of the goalies they have in their current system. Who's the person they're going to invest in? What does Caden Primo's year look like next year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So before I go, I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow is the Mailbag episode. So please, please, please make sure that you send us your mailbag questions to lockedoncanadians@gmail.com or LO_Canadians on Twitter, DM, reply, tag, whatever. We love that. You can send them to me on Instagram if you want. For those of you who have me on Instagram, you can also leave them in the YouTube comments. Also, as you know, we are Locked On Canadians, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day. And in addition to us, please check out some of the fantastic shows we have. We've got Locked On NHL that covers all manner of NHL 5 days a week. We've got Locked On NHL Prospects with our friends Hattie and Sebastian. We've also got some division rivals that we absolutely love their content. And that's Brian and Scotty over at Locked On Detroit Red Wings. We absolutely adore them. Check them out as well. In the meantime, while you're waiting for the mailbag episode, make sure that you are subscribed to this podcast. Make sure your friends subscribe, ratings, etc., at gmail.com as well. Thank you for listening, and either Scott or both Scott and I will be there tomorrow, depending on Hurricane Beryl. See you tomorrow.